Okay, so when you hear the word shirk, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For a lot of people, it's probably something like ancient idols, right? But what if I told you that common definition, well, it barely scratches the surface? Today, we're going to dig into the source material to uncover a meaning of shirk that might just be hidden in plain sight.
So let's just ask it straight up. What is shirk? Now, the typical answer seems pretty simple, but as we're about to find out, there's way more to it.
Right? So the textbook answer, the one most of us learn, is that shirk means polytheism. Worshipping idols, having multiple gods. And sure, that's definitely part of it. But think of that as just one piece of a much, much bigger puzzle.
And this is where things get really interesting. What if the sources point to a meaning that's less about who you worship and more about whose authority you follow? A meaning that's been hiding in plain sight all along. All right, so the first big mental shift we need to make is to reframe shirk completely. It's not so much about replacing a divine authority, it's more about creating a partnership in lawmaking. And here it is, the core definition we get from the sources. Shirk is about dividing God's exclusive authority to make religious law. It's the act of taking anyone or anything, people, institutions, even our own feelings, and elevating them to the level of a partner, a co-legislator when it comes to faith.
This really breaks it down, doesn't it? On one side, you've got the common view, replacing God, just swapping one for another. But on the other side, the view from the sources. It's about partnering with God. It's about creating a divided authority. It seems like a small change in wording, but the implications are massive.
And the source texts are incredibly direct about this. I mean, look at this quote. It's a clear warning against just making things up, saying this is allowed and this is forbidden on your own. It frames that power to legislate as something that belongs in one place and one place only. Okay, so if shirk is all about partnering up in lawmaking, the next big question is pretty obvious, right? Who or what are these partners? And this is where the idea just explodes beyond those ancient idols we talked about. The sources really push us to look around and think about all the different authorities we might be following, maybe without even realizing it. So, get this. The list of potential partners is surprisingly long. According to the texts, it can be anyone or anything. Religious scholars, clergy, our own egos and desires, money, even its celebrities or long-dead saints. If we start treating any of them as an independent source of religious law, they become a partner. Let's make this super practical with an example from one of the sources. Imagine a religious text says nothing about eating reptiles. But then, a group of scholars comes out and declares that reptiles are now forbidden. Well, according to this view, by following that human-made rule, you've essentially made those scholars a legislative partner with God. See how that works? Okay, so we've got a new definition, and we know who the potential partners are. But so what? Why is this such a big deal? Well, the sources lay out some pretty heavy consequences. And this is probably the most serious consequence of all. The texts state pretty clearly that shirk is the one thing that God might not forgive. Now why? Because at its core, it's a rejection of the entire foundation of the system, the idea of a single, undivided divine authority. This next quote, honestly, it's pretty startling. It suggests that most people who believe in God are actually doing so while also committing shirk. That completely shatters the idea that shirk is just for atheists or old-school idol worshippers. It suggests it's a much more widespread issue. And the fallout isn't just personal, it's societal. This timeline here, drawn from the sources, shows a clear cause and effect. You start with a community united under one authority, and you get security. But then, people start bringing in partners, creating their own rules. And what happens? Fear replaces peace, and the whole community starts to fall apart. The sources even give us a play-by-play of how this division happens. It starts with unified guidance. But then, this desire for power and dominance, this thing called boggy, starts to grow. That leads to splits, which turns into sects and parties, and the final step, each new group appoints its own human authorities, effectively locking in what the sources call institutional shirk. Wow. So if that's the problem and how it snowballs, is there a way out? What's the solution? According to the texts, it's all about consciously reclaiming that singular authority. And it's basically a two-step process. The problem, as you see on the left, is following tagut, which is a term for any illegitimate authority trying to make its own rules. The solution, then, is simple but profound. First, you have to actively reject those authorities. And second, you place your trust fully back in the one, singular divine source. I love this metaphor from the sources, the rope of God. It's this image of a single, strong line of guidance. And the instruction is clear. Hold on to that rope, together, and don't let yourselves be divided. Because as we've just seen, that division is the very heart of Shirk. So at the end of the day, the sources boil it all down to one fundamental choice. It's not just about what's in your head, but about what you do. Are you going to follow the judgment of God or the judgment of human constructs? And that really leaves us with a powerful final thought, doesn't it? If the sources define Shirk as following man-made religious laws, well, it forces us all to ask a tough question. In my own life, in my community, where does true authority really lie?